Hey, and welcome to episode 27 of the Cellarcast. Uh, you might hear some people moving around. I'm recording this kind of early in the morning, and some elderly people I live with are waking up right now. In fact, the alarm just went off. I had to wait for like 2 minutes for it to turn off because it's this horrible loud ringing, high-pitched ringing. That's audible from across the house. So, yeah, so it's a Christmas episode. Not really, it's not really a Christmas episode. We did have our Christmas episode, Elf Bowling. Oh, man. Okay, so I went over to... Funny story about that video. So I went over to my grandparents' house for Christmas Day dinner, yeah, and it was just me, and I ended up talking about like, oh, my channel, and I just did this video for Christmas, like for Christmas Day, and my grandfather goes, oh, can we see it? And I was like, fuck, I've literally never shown any of my videos to any of my family, and out of all of the ones it could have been, the elf bowling one was like the most panic-inducing. Maybe not the most panic, what would be maybe Girls of Gaming. Maybe that one would be a little more, but yeah, because it's just, there's a lot of cursing, or a lot more than I usually do, and it's more like sex jokes and stuff like that. And it's just like so hard to... They know literally nothing about video games, but yeah, so my grandmother left halfway through. No, she left like a third of the way through. She just walked out of the room. She said, I don't like this. And I was like, alright. Okay. And then my grandfather, man, it was nothing makes me, I have felt so bad about that video. I was like, this fucking sucks. And the reason is because, like, he's just sitting there and you'd have to know him. There's a lot of that I could describe about, like, kind of his demeanor or his temperament. But he's just sitting there, he's taking it in. And I'm like, fuck, does he didn't like understand how editing worked. Like, I had, like, early on, I in the video, like my yellow text pops up, like I put some text over the screen, and he goes, did you put that there? And I was like, oh my god, like, he can't even tell like what editing is. It's like, he like didn't know, like, he was seeing game footage and he was pointing to like the background, and he's like, so how did you make that? I was like, that's just the game. That's just the game. Like, he does not understand. And it was a really difficult experience. Yeah. Overall, I mean, I had a pretty fine, I had an okay Christmas. That's all I want. I just want an okay. I've had some not fun Christmases. I just having an okay one is just fine with me. My girlfriend did... I think I mentioned this at the end of that video, but if you've been watching the podcast for a while, you might remember my debacle, my journey that I went on trying to make use of that Target gift card that I got from going on like a school trip, and or a trip for my old high school, and being unable to purchase anything of value, of use. Like, and the, eventually that turned into Target will literally not allow me to purchase a hard drive. And then it became, well, before that, the lead up to that was, oh, let me buy some Steam cards. But Target's stupid policy is that you can't buy Steam cards with a gift card. You can't use a gift card to buy other gift cards, which was just maddening. Because GameStop does not have that policy. So obviously it's not like a legal thing. It's just Target's stupid policy. A game... Whoa, what the fuck? My whole thing just froze up for a second. Okay, I was like, oh my god, is Audacity crashing? No. Anyway, right. GameStop's policy is you can take a GameStop gift card and go in and buy Steam cards to your heart's content, but not Target's. I don't know why. You can't even, like, convert Steam money into real money. It's just for games. Like, I don't even... Maybe if there was, like, a cash card, right? Like, you can buy cash cards. I don't know. So, yeah, she got me a $20 Steam gift card. Yeah, she's great. Love you, Kat. And I got some money from my grandmama, which I'm probably going to use to buy a Hitbox. If you're not familiar, a Hitbox is essentially a specialized controller for fighting games. You're probably familiar with like, you know, people who have like the arcade sticks to play fighting games. A Hitbox is essentially the same thing. It's a box with buttons, like arcade buttons. However, instead of having a joystick, you have 4 buttons. So it's kind of like 4 buttons for direction. So it's kind of like a specialized controller for people who are keyboard players, essentially, which I am. I've been a keyboard player for, you know, God, it feels like, you know, 4 years that I've been playing fighting games. I've been a pure keyboard player. So if I was going to switch to something specialized, which I would for, you know, the purposes of going to locals and stuff and tournaments, I would want to get I don't want to be hauling a keyboard and being like, hey, I got this adapter I have to plug into the console to make my keyboard compatible with the PS4. I don't want to be that guy. Also, sometimes I run into some problems where, so the traditional button layout for a keyboard for fighting games, or you know, for like a, what would you call it? Button movement, digital input, not like an arcade stick or a pad or something like that. I'll just say keyboard / hitbox. I'll just use those interchangeably. So the standard layout is you have 3 buttons next to each other, so that would be like A, S, and D, and that's left, down, and right. But then you do not actually use W for up, you use the spacebar, and you hit it with your thumb. And the reason for that is there's a few things. In fighting games, you are going from the most direct thing that makes it easier, or the reason that you would want to do that is because if you play a charge character, so charge characters are characters who have to hold either back or down a direction, and or you know, they have to hold a direction for so many frames and then tap forward plus a button. So if you've ever played, you know, Guile, is probably the most famous charge character. He has that. You hold back, tap forward plus punch, and it's a sonic boom. Hold down, tap up plus kick is a flash kick. And if you've never done that on a WASD layout, doing down up charge motions is really difficult. It's very painful, because if you think about try and, like, just as a test, put your you know, lay your hands out as you would if you had your hands on your keyboard on your WASD, and then try and, like, hold S, and then tap W as quickly as possible, and you will very soon realize that it's a very awkward movement, because your middle finger isn't supposed to, like, lift up that quickly. It's really uncomfortable and it's really awkward. So it's just easier to have it actually on something you press with your thumb. And it also helps that, you know, you don't have to lift your finger to get to an input, to get to a button. You don't have to go from W to S with your middle finger, which is comparably pretty slow. There's also, you know, there's cases where, like, you want to go from, like, crouch blocking to, like, jumping really fast. It's just easier to have it on a different button, right? And so I run into this problem. I haven't. What is it? What the fuck? What is going on? Okay, that was weird. It just froze up again. Strange. Okay. I don't think I lost any audio. Anyway, I ran into this when I was practicing Relius combos in Central Fiction, where you have to do jump canceling. You have to do like launcher, jump cancel, jump B, jump B, double jump cancel, jump B, jump C, and then like some special ender. Like I think it's like 236C. Yeah, no, 236B is the ender. Is it 214? I don't fucking remember. It was a special ender for a spike, and so obviously you got to do some jump cancels. And the problem that I was running into was that I was smacking the spacebar with my thumb to do these jump cancels, and I don't like doing jump cancels in the first place. They make my brain hurt, and my thumb, it was like the side of, or the corner of my space bar, because I have a fancy gamer mechanical keyboard. It's just like a, it's like a block, right? It's like a block, the space bar is. So my thumb just kept smacking against the corner of it while I'm trying to do these jumps, and it actually like it was like digging into my thumb just over and over and over again, and it was actually getting like kind of a little painful. So I was like, ugh. It would be easier if this was just like a round button. So yeah, that's the most like. Usually it's like in a real match, it's not usually like that. Like, Slayer has some jump cancels and stuff like that that I gotta do on the regs, but it's not as like repeated. And usually I hit it differently with my thumb, but I don't even like the fact that like I can have that amount of like pain, not like serious pain, just like ow, my fucking digging into my thumb. Yeah. Hey, speaking of fighting games. One which I might be playing on a Hitbox. I can't buy the Hitbox, by the way, yet, because what I wanted to do was real quick, I wanted to build my own. So you can buy one from a company which is called Hitbox. They're the original developers of it. But you can make your own actually quite easily for around the same price, maybe a little more expensive depending on whatever doodads. But you just need a box, like a whatever kind of box. You could literally use a shoe box. You can order buttons. You order a PCB, which is just the board, and then you basically just cut out some holes, or there's some holes in it in the box. You put the buttons in, you wire them up, or you just connect the wires, and you got your hitbox. You got your hitbox. Bingo card. Burp. Yeah, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to, make something nice that's going to last a while. I could literally use a shoebox if I wanted, but I'd like to buy like a nice metal enclosure, as it's called. Unfortunately, those are always sold out. If you go to All Fight Sticks, which is the main distributor of those, or one of the big distributors of those, they're always sold out. So I've never seen the 16-inch enclosures in stock, so that's the main thing holding me back. And I want to get some nice artwork for it. You can get custom printed artwork for the top. I went on Donburu, and I just did some looking to see if maybe I could find some cool artwork that I would want to put on it. And I found literally the most perfect one. It's Slayer with Remelia Scarlet from Toho, because they're both vampires, right? So I was like, oh, that's so perfect. It's two things I love. It's Toho and Guilty Gear and Slayer. And, Remelia is not my favorite Toho character, but obviously if it was Slayer and Sakuya, that would be perfect. But, yeah, and it's perfectly, it's like very, let me just, can I find it? Yeah, I have it bookmarked. It's like very rectangular. Or it's very like a portrait. What am I trying to say? It's like, yeah, it's a the aspect ratio would fit well on like a rectangular. You could easily scale it to a hitbox cover. So leads me back into what I was going to talk about before I got distracted with my own thoughts. So I talked a bit last episode about DNF Duel, and there were some things which I probably should have just done some more research on, and which I found out actually very soon after I uploaded that, or I finished that recording. So a few things that I mentioned was that I wasn't clear on. Let me just bring it up. So if you recall, DNF Duel had some interesting like decisions for making certain actions easier. So it had, but also offering traditional ways of doing those things. So for instance, special moves, right? So the game has like a light, says like a attack, B attack, special, and the special works like a Smash Brothers style input. Just direction plus special is a move. And then MP, which expends your mana. Those are all special moves that expend your mana bar, which is a resource that has to refill over time after it's used up, or after any of it is used. And for the MP moves, they offer easy inputs, easy versions of the inputs, same thing like just direction plus button. They also offer the full motion, and I spoke a bit about this, about how there had to have been some kind of trade-off, and that there is a trade-off, and it's quite interesting. So yeah, so when you use an MP skill, it drains some of your mana, and here's the catch. So if you use, so mana will start replenishing after a moment of like not being used. If you do the full motion, if you do a full quarter circle as opposed to just like hitting direction plus the button, if you do full quarter circle plus the button, your mana starts recovering much faster, which is nice. And apparently, according to a comment I read from their observation, so when you run out of mana, you go into, it's called exhaustion, which your mana bar starts blinking red, and basically it's not going to come back for a few seconds. It reminds me a lot of like a Brave Break in Dissidia, if you're familiar. Like, your resource is gone, you messed up, now you're going to be starved of mana for a few, like 5-7 seconds, something like that, before it starts replenishing. If you go into exhaustion using a special, or using the full motion of the special, apparently you start recovering it back a lot faster as well. So that's cool, and it leads me to the other thing, which was the inclusion of a block button. So this was very controversial amongst some people, that there was a block button, because it removes things like left-right mix-ups and, the cross-ups and all that. And I didn't think it was really that big of a deal, but I was interested to know that there is traditional blocking. Pardon me. There is traditional, just, hold back to block blocking in this game. Here's the difference. So you'd ask, like, okay, well then what is just stopping you from using the block button? Well, what wasn't super clear is that you have a guard gauge. So when you block moves, your guard gauge gets depleted. A lot of games have this kind of a function. Doesn't KOF, I think, have it? Or something like that. Or a lot of games have some kind of a guard bar of, like, if you block too much, your guard gauge is going to run out, and you're going to just, usually it causes some kind of a break, and you can't block anymore. And obviously you get hit. If you use the block button, your guard gauge depletes way faster. It depletes much faster than if you just do traditional hold back to blocking. So that is interesting, because I was considering, like, okay, it is very similar to the way that Granblue does it, where there is a what am I trying to say? Granblue does a similar thing to like how they do with specials. You can just do like a one button special essentially, or a smash style special. However, Granblue uses a cooldown system, and the cooldowns are much longer if you use the easy inputs versus if you do the full motion, in which case the special comes out just like instantly, or it happens, or it comes off of cooldown like instantly. So one thing that, there's a few things that this does in the kind of design space, and so one of the first thing that's the most obvious is, or that maybe it's not most obvious, but the first thing is that it gives you some options depending on how urgent your input needs to be. Like, sometimes you can't just pull out a DP motion at the drop of a hat in like a split second, but you can hit like down plus special and you'll do, you know, your big uppercut anti-air move. And stuff like that. Sometimes you just need to hit guard. Sometimes you just gotta hit the block button. So like on a competitive level, that's kind of how it sort of integrates, right? Is that top players, or even, you know, players with some experience who understand how the game kind of works, is they end up using both in different capacities. The easy versions and the full regular versions of the inputs. What's interesting is, what I hadn't considered, is that it gives, and it might even be, this is probably the more obvious thing, but it gives you almost like a training wheels version of the game. So like, the nice thing is that the penalties for using the easy versions of these mechanics are not super harsh. Like losing some more mana, having your guard gauge go down. You think about it, at a low level, these things probably aren't that important. Like, oh no, you know, if this is like your first or second or whatever fighting game, oh no, I don't have enough. If I do the easy input version, then I'm not going to have enough mana to do my full like 20 hit into super combo. Like, you're already not using enough mana in a single combo. You're already not using it fast enough for the more expensive specials to really matter that much, because you're probably just going to gain it back. Same thing with blocking. Holding back to block is very weird if you're not used to it. If you haven't played a fighting game that uses it before, it is something that is strange to get used to. And you have to get into the whole like, oh, okay, well, if you do like crouch blocking, you don't move backward, because a lot of people get hung up on like, part of the awkwardness is like, if you just hold back, you start walking backwards if no attack is out. If an attack comes out, you'll automatically block, but like, it feels like you don't have a lot of control. And then you kind of get into like, oh, okay, well, if I crouch block, the default state is crouch blocking, basically. Because when you crouch block, you don't move backward. You just hold your position. So it's a way to just hold your position and stay defensive to lows and mids and the like. So the... what the fuck was I talking about? Right, yeah. So including a block button could be, it's a way to ease people in to the idea of blocking, or making it a little less obtuse. Now, from my perspective, I find block buttons super weird, and I find that super awkward. Whereas, you know, I feel like most people who aren't as experienced in fighting games would probably find it easier or more natural. Like, if you come from something like any like Dark Souls, like any button. Like, think of how many games have block buttons, right? It's a very easy thing to like wrap your head around. Just from my like perspective, it's very awkward because I'm so used to holding just a button, or just holding like down back to block or something like that. All right. So for me, it would probably be pretty awkward. But for a newer player, it's going to be easier to understand, and the higher like amount of the fact that you lose more guard gauge again at a low level probably doesn't matter that much. Like the block strings early, like very new players are not, you know, the newer players, casual players, they're not going to be doing block strings that are so intense that if you're holding the block button, they're going to burn through all of your guard gauge in like one just like 15-second long block string that never ends. It's probably not going to be too much of a factor. So it's actually a very nice way, I think, of getting ahead of myself. So it's a nice way to ease people into these ideas and these concepts of, you know, using special moves and blocking and all that, and maybe like, because if you use the easy input specials, you probably have enough mana to do like, you know, maybe if you're at like a full 200 mana, if you've taken some damage, you have like a full 200 mana or more, your cap is a little higher. 2, maybe 3 special moves, which is the game seems to be really like it wants you to do these cool flashy moves and chain them together and all that. You'll still get the idea and you'll start to like understand the way that these things kind of work together, and then naturally as you get more interested in it, I think you just naturally or you will organically learn to do the more advanced things, right? You will organically learn, like, okay, I want to learn. You find a character you really like, right? This character's super fun. I love the way their moves feel. And then you play a bit with them, and then you start to kind of hit a wall where you're like, okay, you know, maybe I'm going online, I'm seeing people playing this character, and they're doing combos that are way flashier than I can do. How do I learn that? How do I learn how to do the cool looking stuff? Then you find out, oh, you can't do it because you're using too much. You can't do it because, or you're actually no. I fucking tricked myself into thinking it costs less mana. It doesn't cost less mana. It replenishes mana faster. So it would be more like, oh, this guy is playing better than me. What's the secret? Like, you know, like what's going on? Why is he able to have such a more aggressive offense than me? And it's like, oh, it's because he is being way more efficient with his mana because he's getting it back way faster because he's doing the full motions. So you're like, oh, okay, let me practice it. And then you learn like, hey, it's actually not that hard to do a quarter circle. It's really not that hard to do these things. You're probably doing motions or things that are inputs that are as complex as a quarter circle or a DP in other games. It's just that it's never been to do like perform a single action, for instance. And then same thing with guarding. Like, oh man, I'm really like I'm hitting this point of players where now like people are starting to like break my guard. Like what can I do against that? And you find out like, oh, okay, I'm losing guard bar like at a 30% faster or whatever, you know, however much more it is. Let's just say 30% faster rate because I'm only using the block button. So you start to learn like, okay, I can like hold back to block, and you learn crouch blocking. I don't think there's any air blocking in this game, but and then you start to learn like, okay, when I start to see them do it, you start looking for the signs of like when they might be going for a cross up, and that's like when you're okay, this is where I use the block button. And that's like maybe one concern that I have is that like pardon me, is that the block button does sort of kill left right. It might be like, I don't know, maybe there's even more to this system that we don't understand, because they dropped this game with very little info. They dropped this beta with very little info on the audience, right? So maybe there is a more complex trade-off or something with using in terms of like cross-ups, but the fact that you just have one button that negates this whole thing that is in the game if you do the more advanced version is kind of odd. It's sort of strange that you would have this thing negated by the easier version of like a mechanic, if that makes sense. Usually you would think that like, oh, if you learn this more advanced mechanic, then you're able to negate or counter this thing. Like if you learn instant blocking in most ArcSys games, there's just moves that you can like, you could instant block and now you can punish them, right? Instant blocking is like blocking very soon, like basically right as the attack would have landed against you. In previous games it would give you like in like older Guilty Gears and BlazBlues, it would give you more frame advantage, so you would basically recover out of block stun really quick. In Strive it just negates all pushback, which actually does make a lot of moves unsafe because they would rely on like you blocking them and then just the natural amount that both of you would get pushed away from each other. But if you instant block, oh, this move that was negative but safe is now not safe because you're too close. You finished too close. So like you think like that and you're like, that at least makes sense to a lot of people. It is kind of strange to me that that using the more advanced mechanic is actually detrimental in that one area. There might be a lot more nuance to it, but as of now, and that's another thing, right? Like as of now, just gotta hold all judgments, hold all conclusions, because you never know what a game is like. You never know what any competitive game is going to be like generally. And any competitive game worth its salt is not going to have all of its cards played in, you know, a 2-day beta. I remember people were do you remember when Strive had like its like closed or sorry, open beta, like the last one, and it was basically the final version of the game that was going to be released, or the final version that we were going to see before release. No, I messed that up. They had the final open beta, and it was essentially like, this is how the game is going to be on release. They're just doing this to test the netcode and the lobbies and all that. And people were like, yeah, Nago sucks, dude. If you go into Blood Rage, oh my god, oh, I gotta deal with this Blood Rage, dude. Oh, I get so screwed. I lose so much health when I go into it. And then the game comes out, and after like a month, it's like, oh wait, Naga Ryuki's actually like top 3 easy in this game. He is fucking so strong. He is super strong. You just need to learn how to play him correctly and not go into Blood Rage all the time. Like if you look at Hotashi, or you know, not Fab, Deb, another 3-letter like consonant plus B name. Consonant vowel B name. Deb and Fab. Fab is the Potemkin player. Deb is is it? No, I'm freaking, oh my god, I'm getting everyone confused. Who was it? Fame and Hotashi, right? Like really good top like Nago players. And you would watch them play and you're like, oh, this is how you play the character. Like they're managing their blood gauge so well. They're figuring out these block strings. You do like teleport, dash in, close slash, blink in, close slash, blink out, 6H, and you're like, oh my god, like he isn't gaining any blood. That's crazy. And he's got so much pressure. And yeah, it's people are inevitably like, do you remember? I've seen too many launches of like competitive games, and I've got too much experience. Do you remember when Overwatch came out and people were like, oh my god, Bastion is the most broken character I've ever seen? And then the game got like a few months in and people realized that Bastion was actually easily counterable. I remember the same thing with Teemo in League of Legends. Teemo was the meme character for forever because he was he's essentially, he fits into that same category of he's a noob stomper. If you don't know how to play the game, if you don't know like certain fundamental skills like you know, spacing and baiting out abilities, Teemo is going to destroy you. But even characters who are relatively immobile can totally fuck Teemo up in lane. And it's actually not that bad. And you realize, wait a second, there's a reason that this character has only ever been picked once in a competitive game. Or, what, like, there might be, like, there's only, it's under 3, at least, right? There's a reason that this character has never seen competitive play. Any kind of realist. I think one time it was, like, one player was basically just trolling, and he was like, I'm gonna pick Teemo, fuck it. And it's because, oh, this character has strengths that exploit a lack of fundamental knowledge. A lot of, you know, grapplers and keep-away characters in fighting games have this same thing. Like, keep-away characters tend to be, or, you know, zoners. Like, at the start of every Guilty Gear game, Axel is usually pretty strong. And then people learn how to get around him, and they learn how to counter him, and he goes much further down in the tier list. Same thing with, like, Potemkin. In any game except for Strive. And Strive is pretty even in terms of its balance, honestly. But in any other game, it's like... yeah, Potemkin's really strong at the start because, oh my god, you know, people don't understand the movement, people don't understand some of the new mechanics, the feel of the game, right? And then Potemkin just exploits that, and he closes in with Hammerfall and then grabs you and deals 5 million damage with Potemkin Buster. And he's that kind of a character. But once you understand certain, like, things about the game or Potemkin's playstyle, you start to realize, like, oh, okay, I can, like, hang back and I can force him to approach. I can play around slide head. I can play around, like, there's certain counters to his moves. Like, hey, did you know that Slayer's crosswise heal completely counters Hammerfall? Because Hammerfall has 1 hit of armor and crosswise heal hits twice. So it just goes, they, like, basically, they clash. I think they're also, like, the same, they're, like, the same attack level. So they clash, and then the second hit of crosswise heal comes out anyway, and then it just hits Potemkin. It's great. It beats it every single time. So, like, oh, if I just pay attention, if I just hang back, if I pay attention to how this Potemkin plays, and, like, when he goes for Hammerfall to try and close in, I can just anticipate that and just do crosswise heal to counter it. And then beat him every single time, and it's really funny. And now, mind you, you know, obviously it's not like, oh, these honestly, actually, yeah, there's in most Guilty Gear games, Potemkin's pretty bad. But you know, you can do work with them, but same way you can do work with, like, Teemo, or I'm sure you can do it with Bastion. But the point is that, like, there's things at the beginning of a game that people are just going to overhype. Like, do not trust. Be very cautious or be very, you know, hesitant to make hard conclusions about the depth or the balance of a game on, like, day 1, even in the first month, right? Because I guarantee you, even without any patching, it's going to get much more intricate. You're going to figure out how to counter these characters. You're going to figure out how to play around it. The tendency now to just, like, jump into things and just be able to immediately, maybe it's not now, but it's probably always been sort of like this. People just make conclusions because they don't, I don't know, have the perspective, I guess. But I remember, you know, like, I've seen this happen in a lot of games. Something comes out, oh my god, this thing's so busted. Within a year, that strategy is completely, like, it's not even a thing. Like, you never see it. Or the meta's completely changed, even regardless, like, you didn't even have to get nerfed or anything like that. So yeah, same thing with DNF. I'm anticipating the same thing is going to happen with DNF Duel. It seems like a game, pardon me, it seems like a game that has a lot more going on under the hood. But is more accessible. And that's something that I think is very encouraging, is that some people were talking about, I saw a lot of comments about how, like, DNF Duel, either, a lot of people who, like, Strive was their first fighting game, for instance, which is really nice to hear, actually. Strive was their first fighting game. And then they got into DNF Duel, or they saw the trailers for DNF, and they were like, hey, this actually looks pretty cool. It's like got the same graphical style. And then they jumped in, and they had a total blast as a relative beginner, right? And one of the things that I didn't get a chance to play it, but one of the things that I heard was that it just makes it really easy to do stuff. Like, you can just kind of hit stuff, and a lot of things will work out. Like, if you have a slight feel for a character and you kind of understand how their moves work, you can very logically chain stuff together, and it gives you a lot of freedom with how you want to use your moves. Not so much in the movement department, as I understand, but in terms of like your actual attacks and your combos and all that, and your mix-ups and all these different opportunities. It gives you a lot of freedom and wiggle room to do stuff and chain moves from one to the other, and do some funny, funky stuff. There's a lot of... What I really like is the game has a lot of moves that seem to... You can basically like pump up or amp with by spending more mana. So like Ranger, he's like this cool, very like Trigun looking gunslinger character, and he's got like the same jacket type thing going on. And he has obviously a lot of his moves use, his pistols, but he has a lot of moves where you can do it and then you can spend more mana. Like, I'm assuming you can just hit like the MP button again, and he'll just tack on more shots. Like, he has this move he can do in the air where he just does like Joker's air gun special in Smash, where he does like he twirls around and shoots his guns downward. Ranger has like the exact same move, but you can just keep hitting the button and it just keeps he'll just keep shooting more and more bullets as long as you have mana. Like, it takes like 10 or 15 mana with every additional shot. And if you're like above someone and they're blocking, there's like natural pushback that happens, so you just like keep hanging in the air. It's like super goofy. It's really funny. That type of stuff is like, I really like that. I like how cool and how many things you can do just from watching the game. I'm really excited actually for it when it eventually comes out. I wanted to actually, that kind of leads me into... Did I just mention TF2, or am I... No, I talked about Strive. So I saw something like really interesting the other day. Actually, yesterday. Recently. Someone described Strive as the TF2 of fighting games. And I thought that was really interesting, because basically their point was that they kind of likened it to the way that TF2 brought in people from many different shooter communities. Like, there's people who were into CSGO, when did Counter-Strike actually launch? There were people who were, not Counter-Strike, Global Offensive. There were people who were into Counter-Strike, just to simplify it. There were people who were into Counter-Strike, and then there were people who were into, like CODs, and people who were into Battlefields, and lots of different types of shooters and stuff. And these communities were all kind of disparate. And then TF2 came out, and and they mentioned like there was even still at that time there were people who were like pumping Quake, Arena, and that old like movement style shooters. And then TF2 came out, and it kind of like weirdly brought together all of these different communities, plus a bunch of like new casual players who hadn't been into shooters before. And the way that it did that was having a lot of appeals. Like, TF2 is very simple. It's very easy to understand. But it has an incredible amount of depth, with lots of its deeper, like I mean, part of the reason for that is like, okay, so like think about it. Think about all these groups that it's appealing to. Think about like, what do Quake guys want? Quake guys want crazy movement. They want fast action, and they want, that's basically what they want. And they don't necessarily want to aim super hard unless you're like a railgun player. So if you think about that, it's like, okay, well, Soldier has rocket jumps, because remember, TF2, the original Team Fortress was a Quake mod, so it inherits like the Scout's movement speed is literally just like Quake movement speed, right? So Soldier has rocket jumps just like Quake. It's like, oh, okay, I've got that. Scout has this super fast movement with the shotgun. Oh, that's just like literally just like Quake. And then if you like a railgun play style, there isn't necessarily something directly equivalent to that, but like the railgun is essentially just a sniper without a scope. So like sniper could be your guy. And then the Demo Man's grenades, exactly like the original, like the grenade launcher in Quake. Like it's the exact same thing. Are there any other? Now that I think about it, are there any other like weapon parallels? I'm trying to think. Not really. I guess the heavy is a little close to the like the nail gun or the super nail gun, but it's pretty different. Then you think about like, okay, you know, the COD players, they have characters because there's a variety of different like movement speeds in the game. They have characters who can appeal to them. There's a team aspect, but you can kind of, if you're like a Counter-Strike player, you can also like really lean into that team aspect. You can play more like strategic. There's a lot of maps that are very like lots of like corners and ways to exploit information. Like the spy is just an information like exploiting class. You're just thriving on like chaos. And then for COD players, I think that and I'm not as super familiar with Battlefield and how different it is, but you do have this element of like you can act independently, and I think that's really important actually to TF2. TF2 is such an amazingly designed game. Like, obviously, like, you can gripe about the minutia of the balance of certain weapons or certain classes. There's definitely a lot of merit to the complaining about the cosmetics of the game in the last few years, and how it's just totally ruined the art style and all that. But you can complain about parts of individual maps and all that. But I think really at its core, it's impossible to deny that the core of TF2 is just amazingly designed. It's so well, it's like, dude, they fucking nailed it. They hit the home run. They hit the touchdown. The fucking knockout punch. You got the fucking Mexican commentator going, goal, goal, goal. Like, that's the design of TF2. And when I was thinking about this the other day, I was like, man, I really liked it when I switched over from playing team-based games to fighting games, because one of the appeals to me of fighting games is the degree of personal accountability, which I really liked, as opposed to team games where it's like one person. It feels like in so many games, one person can just totally ruin the game for the entire team, and it feels like you don't have a lot of agency, right? That's what I liked about fighting games, is you have pardon me, you have so much direct agency over the game, right? Over the match. And then, as compared to team-based games like League, which I played for a really long time. And then there's always this like thing that happens in my brain where my brain goes, I kind of think of myself as, in my head, as like I'm always having a conversation with two sides of myself. And then the other Taigen, so that Taigen will say that, and then the other Taigen will go, yeah, well, except for TF2. And the first Taigen goes, oh, you're right. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, why does it feel like in TF2, as opposed to like almost any other team game, why does it feel like I have more agency than like these other games. And I sort of considered like, okay, well, you know, you can switch up your class in the middle of the game. You can switch up your loadout. So you kind of have like, you are able to approach situations and you are able to adapt. So I think that is an important element of what makes the game feel like you have more freedom. You are able to adapt to the situation and switch up your strategy and how you're going to approach it. Like, you can look at a situation and say, okay, maybe we need more, like, they have like a lot of sentries that are really giving us trouble. Let me switch to like Demo Man and just like throw some grenades down there and down that hall or over to that area and wreak some AoE havoc, right? You can be like, oh, we're having a lot of troubles with spies. Let me switch to Pyro and just start spy checking everyone, right? Just throwing some flames on people to see if they catch on fire. So I think that is like a notable part of what makes the game feel good, and on like a macro level, like you do get to you get to adapt, you get to make decisions for yourself in response to the game. You're not entirely beholden to your teammates, which is another thing, is that like TF2 doesn't really have, one of the most frustrating things about League, for instance, was that when you die, you give the opponent gold, which makes them stronger because they get to buy items, which makes them more powerful. So in card games, we call that a win more mechanic, right? Like, you are already winning to some degree by putting them in on like on a death timer for like, you know, 20-30 seconds, right? Depending on how long the game's been going on. But then on top of that, you're also getting gold so that you can become more powerful than you already were. And it really what's the word I'm looking for? It's not necessitates. It really, what is the word? Oh my god, I can't believe I'm blanking on this word. It not exacerbates. Bleh. It encourages, or it opens up the oh no, it's like there's a perfect word. There's a perfect word. Facilitates. There it is. It facilitates snowballing. It kind of builds it into the game, this whole system. And obviously that doesn't happen in TF2, because when you die, you just go on a respawn. And the fact that you die and you weren't there and you weren't able to do things and you potentially like let your opponent gain some ground, that is enough, right? That's enough for the game. Like if you're a sniper and you take out the medic and that opens up your team to just hard focus on like the heavy or the soldier or the demo or any of like the power classes, and then you get to like clean them out, and then you get to make a big push. That is enough of a mistake, right? That's enough of a punishment for getting shot as the medic. You don't need to like, you know, give everyone on the enemy team like Uber for dying or something like that. I don't know what you would do. There's no system in TF2 that would even like work with that. Besides like certain items that like level up or gain like stretching, you know, things that like gain stacks when you kill enemies, something like that, which there's only like a couple if I remember correctly. But there's another like really important aspect to, I think, what makes right. So basically one. No, wait, hang on. Let me go with what I was gonna say just a second ago. I saw this video by a YouTuber named Shounic, Shounic, and he does a lot of really cool videos about the way that TF2 is like programmed and coded, and the way that things in the game work. but he also does videos on behind the scenes, or like the development of the game. And he did this like really interesting one. It was called like, why is TF2 designed so well, or something like that. Check him out. It's a great channel. And this video, even if you don't play TF2, is really cool to whoops, is really, my knee just smacked my desk. This video is really cool to, even if you aren't into TF2. And essentially, the way that the original designers of the game, who I think also came from the original Team Fortress mod for Quake, they specifically designed, this was so interesting when I heard it, they specifically designed every class, or pretty much every class, to be able to do their own thing. So they essentially, when they were building the game, they recognized some inherent challenges and obstacles to making an enjoyable game that just come with the fact that it's a multiplayer team-based game, which is that the primary one is you are playing with randos, right? Like, everyone has this idea in their head of like how cool a team-based game is. Well, that's because like most of the reference we have for like working as a team sounds fun, at least to a lot of people. But the problem is that most of the reference we have for team-based things, team-based games, are like activities like sports and such, where everyone already like knows each other, or everyone is like on the team together, right? Like when you're on a sports team with a staple roster, there's 2 dozen other guys who you're essentially like in a class with, right? You're in this group with, and you know them, and you get to know them over the season. You make friends. There is like some connection, and there's a consistency. When the difference is that when you're playing an online game, these are just random people. They're going to be in and out of your life in 20 minutes, right? There's no time to build a bond. There's no time to see them as people. I had that whole thing about, I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but this idea that like when you're playing an online game, it takes this same like road rage effect where the names on screen aren't really people to you. They're just usernames. They haven't been really personified. The same way that when you're in a car, other people are just cars. They're not real people with like lives and aspirations and all this stuff, and maybe they just made a mistake or whatever. So you're going to be way more angry at them because you've dehumanized them, essentially, or they have not yet been humanized. So this is like an inherent challenge that they realized of like, if we make it too reliant on teamwork, it is going to get really frustrating, because these are just fucking randos. You don't know who they are. You don't know how good they are. You don't know what kind of day they're having. You're essentially just throwing your mood and your experience for the next 20 minutes into, you're rolling the dice. This is a problem that I think League had, because the game progressively over time, I think, became much less like independent, or it let you act much less independently. It became more team oriented, because I think that's what Riot thinks makes a good competitive game. Or maybe they just thought it would look better and competitive if it was like, professional scene. But I digress. So they intentionally designed every class, besides maybe Medic, but I'll get to that in a second, to be able to essentially do their own thing, but also work with the team. So that by doing your own thing, you can still contribute to the team effort. So it creates this, think about it, like, you pick soldier. What do you want to do? You want to maybe rocket jump, you want to get around, you want to shoot rockets at guys. Well, that is doing damage, that's picking off targets, that is, you've got all this splash damage, so you're displacing people, you're forcing them to move around because of your rockets. You're causing, a distraction, you're causing them to move. That is, you're controlling space, right? That, you're doing what you want to do as the individual soldier player. You can play it like a single player game, but you doing that is still helping your team. That is making things easier for your team, right? You're covering them. You're forcing them, the enemies, into bad spots that your teammates can take advantage of. The engineer was actually specifically built or designed in the original Team Fortress mod to behave like this. Is they wanted a class that people who were not as experienced with shooters could play. They wanted a class that could still contribute and have some kind of like function on the team without needing to like aim, because Quake is everyone in Quake is really fast, right? Well, not everyone. In TF actually it was they still had like custom walk speed, so not everyone, but there's still like, you know, at that point there was only like 5 or 6 initial classes, and they started adding them, and they realized that they wanted one that people who were not experienced with like shooting and didn't have that mechanical execution, or that physical execution, whatever you want to call it, they wanted a class that they could play and have success on and have fun. And so they developed the engineer, which is just a brilliant stroke of design. And so in TF2, you jump in as the engineer, you find a spot, you start building your buildings. And like, yeah, you're building the dispenser, right? You got your dispenser, you got your sentry, you got your teleporter. All of these things can help you, right? Like, sentry can shoot enemies, right? Dispenser can give you health back and give you metal back if you need to like repair your buildings. Teleporter helps you get from like base to, you know, the front lines faster. But also these things naturally help your teammates as well. Obviously, same thing with the teleporters. The dispensers heal them. The sentries, pardon me. The sentries are great because they create this basically zone of death as soon as you step into their range. So you're helping your team control a lot of space if you have a good sentry position, and you're forcing the enemy team to focus on your sentry. So you're playing a single player game, but you're also helping the team. You can do this for literally every class. The only one, like, you could say medic is probably the one that least fits into this, but even still, as a medic, it's almost like you're playing a different game, right? Because you aren't really interacting in a PvP game like this. There's sort of like 2 types of interaction, right? Or yeah, 2 types of relationships, dynamics. There's player to opponent, and then player to teammate, right? So every other class is basically playing player to opponent. The medic is playing player to teammate, and from their perspective, it's almost like your teammates, healing your teammates is almost like a mini game. The medic is almost playing his own game, where he's trying to keep people alive, and he's trying to find the good players. He's trying to find people who are, you know, he's trying to find like a heavy to pocket, and just stick on him and keep him healed up and dealing damage, and then pop Uber to break through a big charge. So yeah, you are kind of dependent on your teammates, but that's sort of the interaction, right? The same way that the other classes don't need to rely on their teammates, the medic doesn't necessarily have to rely on enemies or interact with enemies. So it's a bit of a different relationship, but it's similar enough. And if you want to play medic, if you want to heal, it works for that. It's still satisfying. Every single class is able to play their own game and contribute to the team at the same time. It's this like brilliant building of like play styles and goals to where everything has like a dual purpose. Like, you can choose to play the game very team oriented, but you don't have to. And it makes it way easier to just jump in, pick a class you like, as long as, you know, sometimes you have to like look at the balance and like you got to play a different class. Like, fuck it, someone has to go medic or something like that. Or maybe you want to play spy, but there's 4 spies on the team. Why are there 4 spies? Sometimes you do have to play a class you don't really want to, but like maybe for 1 round, it's really not that bad. And so the way that they describe it is you end up with this situation where, like, you as the player, you're doing stuff, you're shooting, you're aiming, you're playing your game, and really you're acting very independently and almost selfishly. But you look to the left and there's people on your color doing things. There's other people on your team, they're doing things. You look to your right, there's people on your team doing things, and it feels like you're working as a team. It feels like a team effort, despite the fact that people are kind of just playing for themselves. It's so brilliant. Donkey, when he made a video about Overwatch 2, forever ago now, it feels like. It probably wasn't that long ago, but when he made that video, he was talking about how Blizzard needs to design the game in a way that doesn't force team interaction, right? Or you know, teamwork. They can't design it in a way where they force teamwork. What they have to do is they have to trick players into working as a team by incentivizing them with selfish rewards. Right? So, like, I pick this character because I like this play style. I want to do the thing. I want to play Reinhardt, and I want to like, what's the move he has? He can, like, check people. He can, like, just dash, shoulder charge into people, and I want to bring up the shield, and I want to block a bunch of damage. Okay, that makes me feel cool. I want to hit people with a big ass hammer. I want to use that big earthquake ult. So now you have to design him in a way where that is contributing to the team's work. So the Reinhardt player is happy, the rest of the team is happy because he's doing his thing. And I think the further that games get away from this, and the more that they force you to rely on your teammates, is when you really start to see the cracks in the design. It's when you start to be like, this is not fun. It feels like I'm feeling like I'm just a leaf in the wind. Right, TF2 is such an incredible design. Like, it's so, there's a reason that it remains popular for, like, over 10 years at this point, right? There's such a good reason for it, because it's so well crafted. It offers something that nothing else quite does, that it quite nailed it as well. There's lots of other things you can go into, like, you know, the feeling of the game, like getting there's so many weapons that just feel good to land. Like, landing a rocket feels great, shredding into people with heavy feels great, being a little fucking nuisance as pyro feels great, landing headshots as a sniper is awesome, getting backstabs as the spy, jumping around and speeding and pulling these crazy, like, trick shots with scout, getting a great uber charge with medic is really fun, because you just feel like completely unstoppable. Setting up, like, a bunch of sticky traps as demo, and then just blowing someone the fuck up in, like, a second. Hilarious. You could go on and on and on. You know, you play engineer, you've got this, like, stressful game that you're playing. You're playing, like, a tower defense game, trying to keep all your buildings up and healthy, trying to maintain, like, your position. And then when you do it, it's fun. Like, that kind of stress is really fun for some people, right? For some people. Or then you also get, like, just sitting back and watching this thing that you made just pick people off for free. It's great. It's a great game. What the fuck was I even talking about? Right. So TF2 appeals, because of this design and because of all the ways that it appeals to different styles, because every class is almost playing a different style of game, right? With their like, their movement speed, with their specific weapons. I mean, like you play, there's even more depth when you get into, like, really specific loadouts, right? Like, the Demo Knight is almost considered, like, its own class, basically. It's practically its own class, where you take the Demo Man and you're basically just playing him as this melee rushdown with this huge sword. that you're just hacking away at people with, completely different from his like regular play style, and like that has its own appeal. And one of the complaints that a lot of longer time players have is that there's a lot of classes that don't have alternate play styles, like spy and heavy. Well, others do, and that's a good complaint, because it does lend so much cool expression and appeal to different types of players. And I say all of this. This just reminded me, because I was reminded of this, and I kind of went on this little mental tear because of that post that I read about Strive being the TF2 of fighting games. Because TF2 was able to bring in, was their point. Their point was that TF2 was able to bring in all of these different types of players into one game that they could play casually and have a ton of fun. And what's interesting about Strive is that Strive has weirdly, like, united people for many different communities. Like, the fighting game community has been kind of fractured for a while. Basically, when Street Fighter 4 came out, there was this huge resurgence in interest in the genre. And everyone was like, cool, we're down with fighting games now. And it was a very, like, centralizing game. And then Street Fighter 5 came out, and it didn't come out that great. And everyone's like, fuck, well, we're leaving the Street Fighter house. And this interesting thing happened where it was bad for the genre, but it was weirdly good for the scene, because it got Street Fighter V. The best thing that it did with its launch was it got people to play other games, which is like kind of harsh, but like it's the truth, and it's a weirdly good thing, because there was like this kind of elitism around Street Fighter 4 of like, it has the highest level of competition. There's no other game that's as deep. All those other games, you know, by the way, you look at freaking, like, you know, BlazBlue came out the same year as Street Fighter 4, and it got sequels while SF4 was getting like revisions. BlazBlue's a hard ass complex game, but you know, there were these elitists who were like, no, it doesn't have one frame links. But actually, no, BlazBlue does have one frame links. What the fuck am I talking about? But they just looked at a different style that they didn't understand, and they were like, oh, it's a baby game. It's got air dashing? Pfft, this isn't the grounded neutral footsies. Right, so then when 5 came out, this kind of fracturing happened, where people who got into the genre and really liked it then went and decided, like, oh, what else can I play? And they kind of started looking around and playing other games. Like, people got into Guilty Gear, they got into BlazBlue, they would get into, you know, Killer Instinct, they would get into, which was, you know, on its like 3rd season, I think, at that time. You know, games like Skullgirls, games like, even outside of like the 2D genre, you know, games like Tekken and Soul Calibur, what am I thinking of? Just freaking games like Smash, right? And if you look at these are all like very separate communities. Like, there's like traditional 2D players where it's like, okay, they play like Street Fighter. They might play like, you know, one of the Versus games, something like that. But they're kind of their own thing. And then there's like the anime players. They play Guilty Gear and BlazBlue and Melty Blood and Under Night and all these crazy air dashing anime style fighters. And then there's, you know, people who just play Tekken, right? Tekken players. There's people who only play NRS games. There's people who only play Mortal Kombat and Injustice, right? That's its own thing. There's people who, when you look at like Smash, which is its own thing, there's even divisions within that. There's people who just play Melee. There's people who play Ultimate. There's all these different like sub communities within the FGC. And the really interesting thing is that Strive has weirdly unified them. It's brought them together. for world peace. There's been I found it interesting how like I saw a lot of Smash players picking up Strive. They'd never played a Guilty Gear before. They really didn't have that much experience with 2D or traditional 2D fighters or air dashers or anything like that. But they picked up Strive and they had a really good time. People from other games, like Tekken players, picked it up, and it was really funny to hear some perspective from Tekken players where like every character only has like 24 moves. 24, I don't know why I picked a random. 25 moves? Oh my god. That's so simple. It's so easy to learn. Where in Tekken they have like literally every character has like over 100 moves. Street Fighter players liked it because it was more grounded, and so like let's get into some of the reasons for these things. Like, number one, the game has really great visuals. Like, it looks gorgeous. You look at it, you're like, this game looks fucking super cool. Some people don't like the animation style where like they call it like low frame rate, but I don't. It's like intentionally like styled to almost look like anime at 24 frames. But honestly, in Strive, they go way higher than that. Like, for a lot of things. Like, it looks like Sakuga animation. My lights just flickered. That was slightly alarming. I'm always concerned about the power going out while I'm in the middle of work now. Is it raining outside? I can't tell. It's been really rainy recently. Anyway, so it has that that immediate like wow factor, and it's got a great soundtrack. Oh, did you hear that? Did that pick up? That was a crazy neck crack. So it's got that like kind of ooh, what's this type thing? The Jacko pose, and so it has that to like kind of draw people in. And then you kind of look at it like, okay, different appeals. Like it is a slower, or it's a more deliberate. I wouldn't say slower, but it's things are more deliberate. Attacks take a little longer. The way I would describe it is like attacks take longer, but they do the same amount of damage. Sorry, hang on. So like the way I would describe it is like a block string compared to like the classic Guilty Gear style. A block string in Strive will last the same amount of time as a classic one in the classic style. However, in the classic style, that block string might be like 6 hits, and in Strive it's 3 or something like that. Is how I would describe it. So there's that. There's also like the way that they moved around, like the timing of air dashes. Like air dashes basically take the same amount of time before you're like actionable. However, they moved the period where like you can't do anything and you're moving. In the classic style, it's like while you're air dashing, you can't do anything, but then as soon as you stop, you're actionable. In Strive, it's like you can move you can do an attack as soon as you start moving. However, there's some startup where you got to jump off your little seal in the air. And that's kind of how they almost like moved where the dead space was in the move, or in the movement. So it's a lot more like it's slower, it's more approachable. Combos are shorter and do more damage, or they're shorter for like the same amount of damage, if that makes sense. There's less focus on Okizeme. So there's less of just getting knocked down and getting reset into oblivion. Most of the damage happens in neutral exchanges that end in like at most will end in like a wall break. And wall breaking with a super does give Oki, but that's like more advanced stuff, sort of technically. So there's like these things that make it a little easier to approach if you're used to more traditional 2D fighters. There's or just are new to the genre in general. Like, if you play Street Fighter, it's probably a lot easier to wrap your head around the way that combos work in Strive. If you're like what am I thinking? I think that probably applies to a lot of other genres, or a lot of these other like sub communities in the FGC. There's probably like that. I think that probably not just if you're a traditional 2D player. I don't know. I'm trying to think. It also has the fact that like every character in Gear plays really differently. Every character plays really differently, and however, the basic rules for pretty much all of them are the same. So you've got like, if you're just the good thing about the way that I really like how Guilty Gear characters have traditionally been designed is that at a basic level, everyone is easy to understand because everyone can do Gatlings except for Slayer. Everyone has the same like rules essentially. So you can jump in, get an easy feel for like how their moves are, like how do their moves work, what can they do, and then the actual like once you actually put some time into them and you start to learn them a little bit, you do start to realize that they have tons of variation and they're all basically playing their own game. They're all doing their own thing. They're looking for different win conditions, and that kind of variety works really well to help you like appreciate the game as you kind of scale up in skill. So just a lot of, I don't know, it's nice. It's nice to see Guilty Gear being weirdly the most like accessible, hot fighting game. It's never been that. It's never been that. It's always been a niche title. Okay. I wanted to talk... Do I have anything else to say? I don't know. I'm clicking around to see if I just had a random... Oh, this is a fun story. I haven't actually read this. This is from the Wall Street Journal. We're going to figure this out live. It's called Japan's Seniors Discover New Way to Stay Young. Competitive Video Gaming. So, let's see. Let's read this from Megumi Fujikawa from the WSJ. 60-year-old Atsuka Oyama shares a goal held by many people a half-century younger. She wants to get 100 kills in the first-person shooter video game Apex Legends. True, she's a little rusty, having last faced off against digital enemies in a Space Invaders arcade game sometime in the latter part of the 20th century. I love it when you can just measure stuff in centuries. And but after joining Japan's... The sentence starts with but. Does that work? It should probably be a comma. Maybe she just didn't want to have the whole paragraph be one sentence, but it's all right. But after joining Japan's first senior esports team in September, Miss Oyama notched 10 kills in a month and feels her enthusiasm growing. Quote, watching others play, I thought I couldn't do it, said the retired receptionist, but I didn't like to back off, so I decided to come here at least twice, and now I'm into it. Esports promoters who have seen Japan fall behind powerhouses such as the US in video game competitions think the senior market might be the way to catch up. Okay. So yeah, Japan is the world's oldest nation. It has the highest rate of like old people to young people. So I guess that there's esports teams who are like, let's pick up some oldies. They're not doing anything. They're all retired. So yeah, quote, it's better than having nothing to do at home and watching TV, Miss Oyama said. That's so dope. She now practices a couple of hours a day at home, sometimes going to acupuncture to take care of her tired neck. Oh. With an average age of 68, the 14-person team, this is the Matagi Snipers, hopes eventually to compete in professional tournaments. Wow, in Apex and Fortnite. Wow. Wait. Before they can gun for the prize money or monetize YouTube page views, they need to heed the guidance of Coach Yoshito Lemon Suda, 28. He's a third of their age, and he's fucking coaching them. It's really funny. The coach said his team initially needed a kick in the rear. Some members, to his surprise, didn't know how to use a computer, let alone play a video game. Oh my god. Mr. Suda begins each practice lesson with a lecture. In a recent one, he asked the snipers to write down their thoughts on a piece of paper. Through the exercise, he hoped they would eventually be able to shout concise instructions to one another as they team up to shoot their on-screen enemy. He's teaching them how to shot call. That's so funny. Wait, I still can't tell which direction an enemy or a bullet is coming from, said Mr. Shinoda. Masashi K. Shinoda, 69 years old, who was more accustomed to battling piles of paperwork in his old job at a school. Dude, imagine you like graduate high school and you're like, oh, Mr. Shinoda retired. Wonder what he's doing. And then you hop on Apex and he's fucking busting your ass. He's capping you. After dealing with multiple threats, and dealing with multiple threats is a little more taxing these days. Oh, I guess they're not talking about like verbal threats. Coach Lemon motivates his team by telling them age is an advantage. There is a huge difference in social experience between people who have lived only 20 years versus 60 years. While younger players tend to be more violent, older players can communicate better and lean on teamwork, he said. Oh, this is so wonderful. I was all stiff. When I woke up, my back was super stiff. I'm just skimming this for a second. So, Takaki Kato, a Keio University professor who specializes in motor learning and sports psychology, said he has found esports improve attention and ability to switch tasks in older people. So it should be possible for senior players to find tactics to beat teenagers. It sharpens their minds. Yumiko Nagi Takahashi, at 62, a junior Matagi sniper, wasn't so sure. Oh, she's only 62. What a youngin'. So she says, I've watched high school students compete on YouTube, and it's the difference between clouds and mud. Wow, that's a great expression. Using a common Japanese expression to capture the difference between youngsters and the snipers. That's a really good expression. The difference between clouds and mud. That's sick. I'm thinking it would be great if I could get a little closer by practicing every day. Oh, this is so sweet. That's where the article ends. I love this. I love this so much. I'm reading the comments. Pat Eller says, remove the kill games. Create strategy games that are not based on eliminating or killing anything. Create strategy games that train the brain for positive solutions outcomes. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because, like, if you haven't played video games and, like, you don't really realize that, or you haven't played, like, these styles of games, you don't really realize that, like, it is, like, a very mental problem-solving thing. It's just that you're, like, the way that I always describe Blood's combat system is, or what makes it so good, it and, like, Doom, is, you're solving problems with, you're solving problems on the fly with shotguns and dynamite. Yeah. It's It's great. I love this. Huh. I'm just reading some of these interesting comments from the average Wall Street Journal. Average Wall Street Journal readers. This one comes from Lincoln, Cleveland. I'm coming up on 65 and have always loved video games. A big misperception is that they are isolating. Well, they can be. My daughters taught me how social they can be. I could hear them screaming and laughing with their friends while playing multiplayer games on an Xbox. If it comes to a choice for older people to sit watching TV versus sit playing video games, I'd recommend the games anytime. Great for reflexes, strategy, and excitement. And who couldn't use more of that? Plus, there's no rules that say you have to sit while playing. And someone replies and says, I know a Vietnam vet who was in his early 80s and he enjoys several rounds of EA's Medal of Honor Airborne, a first player shooter. Oh, you can tell this guy's like a dad. He will talk with me on Ventrilo as we play online together, fighting the Germans. I'm 70 and currently playing Chrono Trigger on my PC. Oh, that's so cute. I played it on my SNES back in the day. 70. So if she's 70 now, Chrono Trigger's, oh, when is that? 90, I'm going to take a guess. 93? 93 or 94? 95! Ooh, okay. I was a little off. So if you were 70... No, wait, hang on. If you're 70 in 2021... Wait. In 1995, that's a difference of 26 years. So 70 minus 26. 44! Wow. Huh. Playing Chrono Trigger. 44. Yeah. Is really cute. I'm just really happy. This story makes me happy. You know, we usually think of you know, we usually think of old folkers as pardon me. They just sit around, they don't do shit. But hey, if you could weaponize your elderly population to be an army of top gamers, you know, it might be worth it. There might be some money in there. There might be some national pride. Dude, imagine it. That would be so. It's so interesting, the idea that like in a typically extremely like young youth-oriented competition, that you would what the fuck? It could somehow be, there's a world where it could be dominated by people who are like 60. The average player is the average age on this team is 68. It's so cute. There's some pictures of them, like, oh, these grandmas with their like Razer headsets. This is so cute. Oh, I like this a lot. I don't know how many times I can say it. That's a nice little thing to end off on. My throat's getting a little razzled. A little razzled and honestly not too dazzled in the throat area. The throatness. I hope everyone had a good Christmas. Or at least an okay one. It's better than having a bad Christmas. Thank you for hitting 2,000 subscribers. I literally hit 2,000 on Christmas Day. That was really nice. Couple of sweethearts you guys are. If you have any questions, write them down in the comments below. It has to be phrased as a question. I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. And I will definitely get to them next time. Yeah. Thank you for watching this far. What else do I fucking say at the end of these? I don't know. TF2 is a good-ass game. I just wish it had less bots. Bye.